Welcome to Just Energy Radio with your host, naturopath and medical intuitive, Dr. Rita Louise. We have learned from Einstein's theory that matter and energy are one. Physicists believe that all systems in nature have their own particular way of vibrating, from the swinging of a pendulum to the waves of the ocean to the light that brightens the sky each day. Each of these oscillates at its own unique rate. The same holds true for every thought, feeling, event, or word we speak. Each has its own frequency or rate of vibration. What many of us don't realize is when we take everything in our universe down to its simplest form, it is all just energy. Join Dr. Rita Louise on a journey through time and space where past, present, and future collide. Today, what you believe may be called into question. What we want to know is, who made up the rules? Be brave and step outside the box. We are about to turn our world upside down and venture into the unknown. Hold on. We are departing our own beliefs and entering alternative realms. Enjoy the possibilities.
Hello and welcome to Just Energy Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Rita Louise, and thank you all for tuning into the show today. Well, two very different guests on today. In the first hour, we're going to be speaking with Dan LaFave about the paranormal world of ghost hunting. And in the second hour, we're going to talk to Lynn Woodland about making miracles, how you can have all those things you want in your life. But don't forget, Just Energy Radio is brought to you by SoulHealer.com, where you can find out about all the services that I offer, including medical intuition evaluations, clairvoyant readings, as well as energy healing. Plus, the site's loaded with articles and my books and products, just tons and tons of information that you can look through, all for free. It's also brought to you by the Institute of Applied Energetics, where you can learn to become a medical intuitive, energy medicine practitioner, or intuitive counselor. That's www.appliedenergeticsinstitute.com. And please do check out the Just Energy Radio webpage. That's www.justenergyradio.com, where you can find out about who's coming up on the show, access our over 5 years' worth of archives of excellent programming like you're going to hear today, as well as sign up for our weekly newsletter, where you can find out in your inbox who's coming up on the show. And we have some great programming coming up, and I have not even started scheduling October, and I have a list of amazing guests. The hits just keep on popping. Anyway, I do want to let you know there's a big conference coming up in October, and I think it's the weekend of the 18th, the Paradigm Symposium. It's being held in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And if you are a fan of Ancient Aliens, many of the people that are going to be at this show have been on Just Energy Radio, including Giorgio Zukalos, you know, the guy with the hair, Philip Coppens, good friends of the show, Larry Flaxman, Marie Jones, Laird Scranton. I'm just thinking off the top of my head people's faces that I can think of. But the killer one is Eric Von Däniken, you know, Chariot to the Gods, the grandfather of the ancient alien theory, is going to be there speaking. So if you're in the Minneapolis area or want to check it out, I mean, I know I'm taking my, 15 different Eric Von Däniken books with me to get him to sign all of them. But shh, don't tell him. I don't want him to, hide. Anyway, you can find out more information about that at intrepidmag.com, intrepidmag.com, and I'm sure they have their own website, but I forgot to write it down. But you can find it through intrepidmag.com, because Intrepid Magazine is one of the major sponsors. Actually, they're the ones holding this event. Anyway, let me tell you a little bit about Dan and get him on the air. Dan LaFave has a lifelong paranormal interest, which encompasses the last 44 years of his life. Dan, over the years, has become the lead investigator on 3 established, reputable Texas paranormal teams, as well as being the team manager of a TAPS family member team based out of San Antonio. Dan, the founder of Graveyard Shift Paranormal Investigations, is the author as well as recently released book called Shadow of the Ghost Hunter. So please welcome to Just Energy Radio, Dan LaFave. Hey, Dan, how are you?
I'm doing good, Rita. How about yourself?
I am doing excellent, and thanks for coming on the show, and totally congratulations on your new book.
Thank you. It was a long project in the making, but glad I finally got it out this year.
Well, cool. Your bio says that you've been interested in the paranormal for 44 years. How did that whole thing start, and how did you get interested in the world of ghost hunting? Because many people didn't even recognize it as something until, like the last 5, maybe 10 years.
Yeah, good point. Honestly, even the word paranormal, as you know, only really came about in probably the last 15 years. Before that, it was referred to as the supernatural. And, just about every book in those days had supernatural in the title. To give you an idea how I got into it, again, I've had an interest in this my whole life. And that came from basically being a kid and experiencing things from time to time that were real confusing, like every once in a while see fleeting shadows out the corner of my eye. Also hearing voices sometimes, sometimes hearing my name called. It didn't happen very frequently, but whenever it did happen, as a kid, it can be sometimes really scary. Sometimes there were things that would happen in my bedroom at night, when my mom put me in the bedroom and turned off the light. And, you as a kid, there's obviously the boogeyman myth, and a lot of people wonder where exactly does that myth come from. And a lot of people think it's a figment of imagination. But one of the things I kind of hinged on in the book is that, a lot of times these legends, urban legends, these myths, the boogeyman, other things that are out there, we wonder where they come from. And one of the things that happened again with me, I got that interest going at that point. And I used to play with this really old transistor radio that my mother had back in the 70s sitting on the floor. And what was funny, I never really listened to the music. I couldn't figure out why I was attracted to the radio. But what I used to listen to were the frequencies in between the radio stations. And there were times where I used to hear voices come out of the radio. It was really strange.
So you heard, natural EVP kind of stuff?
Natural EVPs, right. Yeah, like communication things. Some of that could be ruled out probably as radio stations, little clips, but these are like in between the AM, FM bands, and I used to listen to AM a lot, especially. And a lot of times there were like direct little things that would come out of the radio at me while I was sitting there playing with it, and that just really got my attention, And in those days, I didn't have a tape recorder, and one of the first things my mom got me for Christmas was an actual old-time analog tape recorder. And, I started playing around a lot with that recorder, and there were times where I captured weird, strange things on that as well, just when I was recording myself. And obviously as a kid, a lot of times adults will put things down like that. They'll be like, that's just your imagination. But I used to think otherwise, and this was around like age, 6, 8, 7, way back. And I used to watch, the shows In Search of back in the 70s with Leonard Nimoy hosting, and Dr. Hans Holzer coming out on that show, the Warrens, many different people. And that really got my interest, really got me going, and used to buy a lot of books. My mother used to buy me a lot of supernatural books. And things just kind of took off from there, but really didn't get seriously into the paranormal on this level probably till about 1998. And that's when I got going at this higher level as far as being a paranormal researcher. And if you like, I can give you a little more history, how it's evolved since 1998.
I think people kind of get an idea. I mean, I just find it interesting when people find really young, when they kind of look in hindsight where their interest in a topic began, the ones that tend to be very passionate about it had this passion as a child. And it's something that just has kind of stayed with them their whole life.
Exactly. And the passion, a lot of people who never have experienced a real extreme paranormal event or something that you can't rationalize from any type of logical viewpoint, those people don't understand. But the people who have had personal extreme paranormal experiences, even though they may not happen very often, people remember those times. And, that usually is what draws most people into this field and gets them going on a higher level.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I've noticed in the paranormal world is that there seems to be some contention between, and I'm going to use my terminology, ghost hunting enthusiasts and paranormal researchers. And this is kind of a two-part question. How would you define or differentiate the two? And is there room for both in the ghost hunting world?
Yeah, that's actually a very good question that you bring up, because I do consider there to be a difference. Most people use the term ghost hunter because it's really a general term that popped out. And as you know and I know, if you go back 15 years, there really wasn't much paranormal around at that time. You could, go on the internet. You couldn't find much. It was really, honestly, it was probably hard for people in those days to find anybody to help them as far as the paranormal is concerned. And then, as we know, in 2004, that all changed once the ghost hunting shows came into play. And the paranormal world has massively transformed since those days, as far as different individual people coming in or teams. Now, I tend to think that the word ghost hunter comes in more or less from the TV mainstream. And it's really a generic term that we use because everyone can really, if you mention ghost hunter, everybody can identify with what that word is. Now, ghost hunter, there really are differences in this field, like what you asked in your question. And a lot of that comes from a personal idea or approach that people want to take. Some people take this field a lot more seriously, like myself and others, versus a lot of other people out there. There are some people that are just going out basically for the thrill of trying to encounter paranormal activity or trying to experience some type of ghostly phenomena. These people might consist of ghost hunting clubs or social groups or something along that line where they go out and they get the just minor equipment and they go out and they have fun. They run out to cemeteries, they run out to wherever they're going just to see if they can experience something. But a lot of times those people may not take it to that next level because maybe they may choose not to. Now, again, with me and many others out there that are in this field, we consider ourselves to be more or less ghost researchers, ghost hunters / researcher. And the difference with us is that we do take it to a much deeper level. We handle client investigations. We handle quite a few of them. I've been doing this again for 13 years now, and that's all involved client investigations and so forth, just like what you see on TV and different areas. Doing a client investigation is a totally different animal for people that don't know. You're usually contacted by people that live in homes, people that live in businesses, have businesses, should I say, or even other locations. And we've done, since we formed this team back in 2008, Graveyard Shift Paranormal Investigations, and of course we're in the South Texas region, we have done numerous private client investigations. And these consist of attorney offices, doctor offices I've done in the past. We've done military officer locations on actual military posts that are historic. We've gone in and done investigations for business owners and then, of course, numerous private home investigations all throughout Texas. Some of these were on different levels where some of them there wasn't any activity that we could find. Sometimes we went into other locations and we found a little paranormal activity. And then other times we went into locations and we found what we consider extreme paranormal activity, and that's usually less than 10% of the time. And then, of course, we've even done investigations that involve things along what people label demonic possession, and those are very, very rare and very infrequent. They're probably less than 1% of the time. And we've actually, on this team, we've worked with the Catholic Archdiocese on a case that we did a few years back that went all the way up to the Archbishop for approval. And then the church took over that case at that point after they reviewed all our documentation that we provided. So, like you say, answering the question, there are major differences, in this field. It's good either way that you look at it because the enthusiasm is out there.
For the buyer, for somebody, all right, not a buyer, because usually, and correct me if I'm wrong, there's not really a fee for having your house or business evaluated by a team, or that's at least at this point in time the general understanding, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, we have never
Okay.
charged on this team, and we do not charge. Yeah.
But for someone that has something going on, or they think they have something going on in their location, is there any way, because I'm just kind of picking your brain, because you're an expert, for the consumer to tell if they are contacting a team that are more, I'm going to call it enthusiasts, versus a group that's really going to, get down to the nitty-gritty and do a serious investigation of their property? Is there a way for, the layperson to tell?
Yeah, they're actually, it is kind of hard. You got to think about it from a personal vantage point. If somebody's experiencing activity or strange occurrences in their home that are either scaring them or they just can't figure out, it's kind of rough for them nowadays to exactly find a really good, reputable paranormal team. First of all, I know you used the word expert. That's one of the things we don't really consider ourselves to be experts. We consider ourselves to be really experienced, because we've been doing it a long time and we've encountered a lot of things. There's still a lot of things to learn in this field, though, and that's one of the reasons why we don't necessarily like to label ourselves experts, even though some people may use that term.
But on a scale of 1 to 10, you're more in the 7+ area as opposed to the 3. So
yes,
I would put you into the
right.
more expert category range.
Yes. Yeah, if you want to look at it from that point, yes.
Okay. Sorry.
But
getting back,
one thing, no problem. But you bring up a good point. Yeah, we take it a lot more seriously. We have a lot of equipment that we take in. We are definitely not your average paranormal team. We do take it to a higher level. But what happens, and this is kind of what's happening in Texas and elsewhere right now, there is a society that was created by, it's called National Paranormal Society, and it was created basically for paranormal unity. And one of the things that is really neat about that society is that they're creating it so that if somebody does have a question, they can go to that society and they can get some good information in different states as to where the reputable paranormal teams are. And what normally happens within the paranormal community grapevine as far as paranormal research is concerned, everybody learns more or less over time who the very good teams are and who's really good at what they're doing. It's not to say that the teams coming right into the field aren't, who are newer to the field, it's not to say that they're not good or anything. It's just that sometimes they may not have the experience to handle extreme paranormal cases if they do come up, or they might not know the right approaches to it. And, you know, a lot of times we get asked by other teams for advice and different information like that. I talk to a lot of people on Facebook privately who send me private messages asking questions about this, asking questions about that. And we're very open about answering those things. One of the things, though, on our team, when we handle our clients, we are very confidential, you know, because a lot of times we'll ask the client in the very beginning, and we have them sign forms and different things, consenting as far as liability and so forth. We'll ask them, you know, are you okay with your name or location being given out? If you're not okay, you know, check this off, and we'll be very confidential and keep it very discreet. But we always tell every client that we reserve the right that if we do get some paranormal activity evidence, we reserve the right to share that with the public as long as we don't disclose their name or disclose their location as to how we're presenting that evidence. So it really, Rita, to be honest with you, it's a very interesting field how we approach things.
No, and I commend you for the level of professionalism that you bring, you know, to the table and to your clients, and the way that you handle it. I mean, I've been in this field. Actually, I used to be part of a house healing team. It was a group of psychics that used to go in and look for anomalous information in homes, and I was doing that in the early 90s. You know, and so when the whole ghost hunting thing, you know, when groups started forming in Texas, I became part of a group because people didn't even understand that, the ghost hunting part, much less having your house healed. You know, closing vortexes, moving spirits out, communicating with the dead, doing that whole thing. It was like there wasn't much of a market. How's that?
There really wasn't. You bring up a good point because you know as well as I do looking at the past. Back in the past, if you mentioned the word paranormal or supernatural 15 years ago, 20 years ago, people would look at you funny. You know, back in those days, it wasn't as open a field as far as discussion as it was back then. One thing we've noticed is people have become more open-minded to the possibilities of the paranormal existing as far as the different areas of the paranormal, not just ghosts and hauntings, but other areas as well. I think people are more perceptive now, and I do think, you know, paranormal television for presenting that, and also paranormal radio, it brings out more openness and more awareness, and people just are a little more adept to, if they have something going on in their home, they're more liable to reach out, you know, looking for that help, where in the past, they really didn't know where to go, and just like what you mentioned, they were confused back in those days.
In all the places that you've investigated, how many, in your opinion, have been truly haunted?
Honestly, we don't use the word haunted very, very often, and there's a reason. What we consider on our team, as far as labeling any location haunted, that location would have to have very excessive paranormal, what we consider paranormal activity, occurring on a very frequent rotation. In other words, if a place has things going on daily, possibly, or as far as the frequency being really high on those activities happening, and can be documented, you know, by not just our team or even other teams going in. We don't like to use that word. We only use it when we go into a location and it's very, very extreme, and we've actually encountered a lot, and we walked out with a lot as far as paranormal evidence is concerned. Now, we do label a lot of places possibly having paranormal activity because there's a difference. You know, sometimes we'll go in a place, we'll only get a few EVPs or just have a few things happen to us, and we'll confirm that the place has paranormal activity, but it may not happen all the time, and usually we get that from objective interviews with the owner or the client, whoever's there, on the past history of what things have happened. And you'll get people sometimes telling you that, oh yeah, it happens, but it only happens like this month, and then the next month we don't have anything, and then all of a sudden it picks up again. And then you'll have other clients where it's happening all the time, on a daily basis. And these people really, in that instance, are very unnerved because it's hard to live in a haunted environment. It really is. People who've never encountered something like that really don't have any idea, but it can be very extreme at times.
I don't know. I've lived in 2 haunted houses. It's like you get used to it.
And you know, right? Right.
Okay, so you leave all the lights on.
We have had. You know what's funny, Rita? We have had clients before that were like that. They were so afraid of what was going on in their house. A lot of times they would go to bed and shut off everything, and all heck would break loose in their house at night. They'd hear cabinets opening, closing, doors opening, closing, lights flickering on and off, noises, voices, you name it, footsteps. And these people, honestly, it doesn't happen all the time, but we have encountered clients that were very, very afraid, and they left their lights on all night. And you can only imagine what their electrical bills must have been like. And, we're talking professional people. We're talking very rational people. A lot of them were law enforcement, and they were still getting nervous about what was happening in their homes.
One of the haunted houses, I'll share this story with you and the listeners. One of the haunted houses I lived in, which I didn't know until I moved in, this was in college, had been the town funeral parlor.
Wow.
It was like, no wonder why the rent was so cheap. And so I lived there for an entire year, and, this place was freaking spooky. There was one room in the house that I literally went into 5 times the entire year because the energy in it was so bad. Anyway, when the people moved in after us the next year, because, we were on lease, and so we were just more than happy. It's like, hey, 2 more weeks and we can get out of here. And apparently the story came back to me was that they couldn't understand what was going on with the hall light because they would turn it off at night and they would get up in the morning and it would be back on, and they would turn it off in the day and they'd come home and it would be back on. Personally, I don't recall ever turning that light off because it was the hall light and it was too spooky, and that's where the ghost was in the hallway. And we just left the light on. So, anyway. Maybe the ghost was scaring itself and it needed to have the light on. I don't know. It could happen.
It's hard to say. Yeah, it can, definitely. And you bring up a good point. Like researchers, for instance, like myself and others, and my wife and everybody, we would love the opportunity to live in an environment, a home, whatever it be, that has strong paranormal activity. We honestly would love that because it would give us an opportunity to study it more, to research it more. Other people who have an understanding, just like yourself, living in an environment, are okay with that. They can handle it, and there's quite a few people out there. But there are those people out there also, and I've run across them with investigations before, who had extreme activity, and one of the first things they tell us is they're like, I want to sell my home. I want to get out of here. I can't handle it. Some people have had problems going to work because they're kept awake all night from things happening, and they're so nervous, so freaked out that it's affecting their jobs. Their coworkers can see it. We've encountered that. It doesn't happen very often, but every once in a while we come across what we consider an extreme case. It does happen.
Mm-hmm. When you go into these locations and come to the determination that there's paranormal activity or the next step that it's haunted, is this based on pictures, EVPs, video, or is there something else that gets added into this mix to make that determination? I guess my question is, what kind of evidence do you need to have in order to identify some place as having paranormal activity or as being haunted?
Well, it's usually a correlation of everything. We have 8 members on this team, and if we ever go into a location with all 8 members, and everybody walks out with some really good evidence as far as video, audio, EVP, or pictures, or personal experiences, or instrumentational data, what we call data from the different electrical instruments that we use when we investigate. It's usually a correlation. One of the things that we look for with paranormal activity is that if we're in an environment and something starts to happen, and say like we have a K2 meter in our hand and an electromagnetic meter of any other source as well, because we use several of them. If things start to happen with those instruments, then we're basically taking a little step further at that moment and trying to see what else might happen. And usually when we go in, we'll set up a very controlled environment with different instruments, different things, just so we can see what type of other correlation we can get. So if we go into an environment and we usually investigate, I'll give you an idea on one of our investigations. We'll usually go in around 8 p.m. at night, and we'll start that investigation around that time, and we'll usually run it till about 3 or 4 in the morning. And that usually includes a very intricate setup DVR system, many static cams, which are regular infrared, and also wide spectrum, full spectrum on the video cams. And then we have numerous other cameras. We have numerous other electrical devices. And we start to get a lot of things coming back as far as evidence on all that. Then we sit down and we discuss it, very intricately. And we're very, I have to admit, on this team, we're very, very strict on our analysis that we do. We look at things very, very closely. If something, as far as evidence, is sitting on the fence and doesn't lean this way towards natural or lean that way towards paranormal, but it's still very, very strange, we're liable to say that that's inconclusive. We just leave it out there in the inconclusive category. And we have a lot of stuff that's in that category. But as far as the evidence that we have gotten over the years, we've just gotten some really, really extraordinary things as far as EVPs. We're talking like very direct communication, coming back to our questions. Very intelligent, very responsive. It again is just really, really amazing what we get, but we do form very objective observations from all that as far as answering your question.
You bring up an interesting topic that I want to explore with you, is the whole concept of EVPs. I go to a lot of ghost conferences, and so there's inevitably someone that, does a presentation on their EVP findings. I don't get them, Dan. I just don't get them. There are some that seem pretty good, but they'll play a bunch of stuff that sounds like, and it's like, okay, and that's supposed to mean something, and then they say, oh, well, it says this, and what do you do with that? Do you feel that that's good EVP? I know you know what I'm talking about. Because
I know
I'm sure
exactly what you're talking about. Right. I follow, just like on Facebook, I follow the paranormal community a lot, and I have a lot of friends in this community that I talk with who are serious researchers. I see a lot when it comes to EVPs, and I listen. Sometimes people post something, and I'll listen to it, and I'll be like, I don't hear anything. Or like what you said, I'll hear something garbled. And my first thought is, how can somebody use that as paranormal evidence? If it's garbled, sure, it may be something, but it also may be something else. Now, what we use on this team as far as evidence, I'll give you an example. A few years back, me and my wife were investigating an attorney office with our team. And this was a big 2-story building, and of course we were in there at night. We had our huge base station set up downstairs in one of the rooms, and this building was so big that if you went back there and you closed the door where the base station was, you could not hear those people back there. You could have 6 people back there and you still couldn't hear them. And what we do on this team is we split off into twos when we go into, in other words, only 2 people will go off and everybody will stay back at the base station. Well, me and my wife went upstairs, and we were up there doing an EVP recording session, and I sat down probably I guess we had like 3 recorders recording at the same time, you know, on different desks and different things while we were asking questions. And all of a sudden, I had a full spectrum camera, I was taking pictures, and we had other equipment. All of a sudden, I started experiencing severe battery drainage problems that were going on with my equipment. And these were like totally new batteries that all of a sudden the camera just went zapped and there's all the battery power. It just immediately left. And I had a few batteries in my hand and I put them back in the camera. Same thing. Batteries went again. So I was making comments to my wife Connie at the time. I was telling her how frustrated I was that this was happening. Didn't know what was going on. But I was getting mad at that point. And where this goes is that I told her at one point, I said, let's go downstairs so I can get some more batteries. So we turned off our recorders, went downstairs, and went back. Well, where this gets interesting is where we did the analysis. When I went back and started listening to our recorders later, I get to that point, and I can hear myself on the recorder venting my frustration over the battery drainage problems. I could hear my wife, and we were only 2 people up there, nobody else around. And all of a sudden I made a comment about the batteries and how mad I was about it. All of a sudden this male voice comes on, clearer than day, almost like he was standing right behind me, had a southern accent and everything. He goes, you better change those batteries. And, you know, we get things like that, Rita. We get things where they're toying around with us. Sometimes we get some very serious things where it sounds very ominous, very scary. But we get very complete sentences coming back at times. It doesn't happen all the time, but we get sentences where you can tell that they're old, they're young, they have accents in their voice. We get EVPs in other languages. We get them in Spanish. Sometimes we've gotten them in German. We get them all. And, you know, when you get things like that, it just really, really grabs your attention. And that's what keeps you going and keeps us going.
And let's follow this up. So you got EVP, you had the battery issue, what I want to come back to here in a second, but you had battery drainage issues. Did you have any other evidence tied to that? Anything come up on your videos or pictures while you were in that location?
Unfortunately, no. I think at that time, me and my wife, I think we had, there was a static camera that was placed up there, and it was looking in our direction. But the static camera didn't, have anything weird. But in the past, during other investigations, we have had our equipment sometimes where things are going on. The static cams will start to flicker a lot. Sometimes they go out completely for a few minutes, and then they come back on. And we're talking, very strange. It doesn't happen very often. I mean, we know our equipment when we set it up. We know how good it is because how long we've been using it. And all of a sudden, when you have cameras going out or batteries that are totally charged and you lose that electrical charge within a few seconds of turning on that camera, it really gets your attention. The paranormal, what I've noticed over the years, it always happens by surprise. It always catches you off guard when paranormal activity happens. A lot of times you're not totally prepared for it when it does happen.
That's why it's paranormal. But it sounds like having batteries die. I hear that all the time. Is that something that's common? And if it is, do you have any thoughts or insights why that phenomena would occur?
Yes, and I've actually hinged on some of this in my book.
Shadow of the Ghost Hunter?
Right, Shadow of the Ghost Hunter. I go over a lot of different topics in the book, covered many different areas. What we think with the battery drainage, it does happen a lot. It doesn't happen all the time, but a lot of times it will happen to different investigators in different locations, and a lot of times it will happen over and over. There's been times where I've taken 30 new Energizer batteries into a location and had all those batteries drained, every single one of them within 5 to 10 minutes. That's happened before. What we think is happening, and again, this is just a theory that's out there, and I discuss some of this in the book, we think that they're drawing on some type of energy. They're looking for some type of energy source so that they can possibly manifest themselves. So that this might, when we say manifest, that can come in the form of them trying to talk, possibly, use some type of voice, or it might even come in something more extreme where they might try to form themselves. We don't know exactly what's happening with that, but we do tend to believe that these entities they consist of some type of energy form. Maybe that's what spirits are. You know, when we die and pass over, maybe we turn into some type of energy. A lot of that goes with the electromagnetic meters that we use, because sometimes these meters just go berserk all of a sudden. And one of the things that we do when we go into a room with those meters is we'll walk around and we'll do a check of the whole environment, what we consider a baseline reading, to get an idea where the wires might be, get an idea where this might be, what things in that room might be giving off electrical signals. And we'll have those readings, but when we talk about electrical spikes that happen on these meters all of a sudden, we're talking huge spikes. You know, we're talking like something that comes into the environment all of a sudden and just makes our equipment go crazy. We don't know exactly what all this is. Maybe that's the reason why we're still going, because there's still, after all these years of doing this, there's still many, many questions, many, many answers that we're still all looking for.
I will admit, I have not been in the field in a while. The group that I was working with, I don't want to say they've disbanded, but they haven't done anything in a long time. And I'm not currently active with another group, which I don't really understand. I don't know that they like psychics, which we're going to come back to that question, because I always like asking that question of someone who runs a group. Anyway,
right.
Equipment-wise, I mean, I know, a few years ago, we would take our EMF meter, and it would only go up so far. And, and then it would be, redlining and hitting the end. If you hit some heavy-duty electromagnetic area, like a fuse box or power box, that wasn't insulated, right, it would go crazy. Have they, in the paranormal world or, even in the real world, have meters that actually track higher frequencies or higher amount of radiation being expelled, so you can actually determine how big and how high it is? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense. There are several different electromagnetic meters out there. One of the better kinds to use is probably Tri-Field, has several meters out, and they have one that is very conducive to rolling out, I don't remember the model number on it, but they have one meter that will actually roll out the possibility of some type of natural electrical phenomena. In other words, coming from a refrigerator, coming from whatever, a fuse box, anything. What happens in homes, the way homes or businesses, when you look at the electrical wiring, you're talking about AC current, going through the wires. And if I remember right, don't quote me on this, but I think it's at like 60, I think the average reading is like, 60 hertz going through natural wiring in a home. And with this Tri-Field meter, when you go around, it can roll out. It can tell you that what it's more or less getting is not a natural phenomena. There's something else. We don't entirely base everything just on electromagnetic spikes, because you can't do that. But that if you have a correlation between many different things that you put out there, and also a combination of a personal investigator experience, at that moment, because we know when paranormal activity happens, we know we feel things, We sense things. Cold spots, that's another thing. You know, I've been in environments before, Rita, where we turn off all the air conditioning, hotter than heck. You know how Texas summers are. We go in some environments, it's like 98 degrees in there, and we're dripping sweat. You know, our shirts are just soaked because some environments may not have air conditioning, and other environments we shut off everything. I've stood in environments where I'm sweating totally. I'm just like very, very uncomfortable, and within a few seconds, all that changes, just like I stepped in a cold freezer. I've had temperatures drop from 95 degrees to 27 degrees within a matter of a few seconds, where my breath is actually coming out my mouth right in front of me. That doesn't happen very often, but when that does happen, it chills you to the bone, and it's really hard to describe for people that haven't had that happen. But that just, things like that really, really get your attention. That tells you that whatever's happening is not natural. There's something else occurring here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to giggle, you know, but it was 27 degrees, and it'll chill you to your bone. It's like, that's because it's 27 degrees, Dan.
Yes, yeah. And Rita, I'm not joking. When I say you can see your breath when that happens, you can see your breath. It's coming out. You feel it on the skin. I've lived in Michigan before. I know temperatures when they drop. You're freezing. You know, you don't just feel it on the skin. It goes inside your body. It's so cold. And you know, there's been times where I was shivering from it. It was so bad. And you just know it's usually a combination of that. It's a combination of feeling something electrical in the air. I felt that. I can usually tell when an environment is changing. You know, if an environment is something starting to go on, I can sense it. I'm not saying I'm psychic or anything, but maybe it comes from the fact that I've done it so long. Maybe I'm tuned into it. Maybe I'm sensitive towards it. But you can tell it. You know, there's been times where we've gone environments where we're totally healthy, and within 10 minutes we're sicker than anything. We have nausea that just hits us so hard that we have to step out. You know, because it's gotten so bad that people are about to pass out. That has happened to our team before. And sometimes you step out, and within a few seconds of being out there, you feel fine again. You know, and then you come back in and you get sick again. Those things don't happen very often, but again, when those things happen, they get your attention.
I experience the nausea a lot in a lot of different environments when I go in doing investigations. But with that said, so does your group work with psychics or mediums, or are you one of the, we don't like those people because they're too weird?
No,
sorry,
Rita,
I ask every ghost hunting people, but every ghost hunter person I bring on the show, because I'm biased that way.
No, it's a very good question, Rita. It really is. Our team, even though we're more or less based on a scientific foundation, we do bring in psychics when we feel the need for them. There have been some cases that we've done where we go in and we investigate and we walk out with lots of paranormal activity. What usually happens with our clients at that point, and we always let our clients draw their own observation from the evidence that we show them. You know, it's not like we sit down and we say, okay, we've done our investigation, your place is haunted, goodbye. You know, we don't do that. We take it a little step further, because you want to show the client the evidence. You don't want to tell them up front that their place has extreme activity. You just want to show them the evidence, and you want to see their reactions to that evidence. And a lot of clients are very, very receptive at that point, because they'll hear or see what you're showing them. But a lot of times they may want something more. They might ask them more questions as to what exactly do I do at this point, or what exactly is happening. Now, in those situations, we do work with psychics. I've worked with a really good psychic out of Houston. She was really good when she came in. Don't get me wrong, her name's on the tip of my tongue. I just can't recall at this moment because we've only worked together once. But I've worked with other psychics in the past, and it's really good when they come in because you can always tell when somebody's really genuine in that area as to how they conduct themselves. One of the first things that I find is that they don't charge anything. Second of all, they're very willing to help on the case. Third of all, we don't tell them anything that we found out as far as research or evidence before they come in. We don't tell them locations. We don't tell them anything in the environment. We just follow them around and we videotape them. And while they're going through, we make sure they're open to us, taping their session. But one of the reasons why we videotape or record them by audio is so that we can go back and we can all sit down and listen in case we miss anything that they say as they're going through it. Mm-hmm. And we do like working with psychics. I do feel that there is a need at times to bring in somebody with that genuine ability to help on a case. And a lot of psychics we've worked with, they have worked with the police departments before in different areas on what we call cold cases, where they help police officers form leads. Police departments don't admit it all the time, but they do use psychics, and it is a very it's something that's needed in this field. It really is.
I mean, I just believe that psychics are like another tool to use, to bring in information and as another resource, as opposed to determining the whole scope of what's going on. Because a psychic is going to pick up the residual energy, they're going to pick up the emotional energy, they're going to pick up a lot of things, and if you're good, you can separate out, well, this is just leftover emotional energy, this is a residual haunting kind of energy, and this is active. But it takes a while of working in the field to be able to separate out what's actually going on and what the implication is in the big picture of identifying a property as being haunted. And I'm just going to use that word, haunted or not.
Right. And I'll bring up a good point to you, a good example. It's a confidential case. I won't give a name or anything, but I'll give you an idea. We did a house for a client, and now he's a friend of ours because of everything we did. But in the beginning, we did several investigations in his home, and we found a lot of really good evidence, including a really good apparition picture, and came out of there basically, scratching our heads. Okay, we have all this evidence now. Where do we go from now? And he lived on a really big property. It's only about 30 miles from us, and he lives on the back of his property. There's a resaca, a big old waterway. So his property goes basically down where you can fish and everything right there. Well, he was encountering lots of things, Rita, and we decided to bring in a psychic, and that's where I was working with this psychic out of Houston, and she was really, really good. And she, one of the first places she went to was the shoreline where I could find his house. And she kneels on the ground, and she picks up immediately, and again, we hadn't told her anything. We got readings back there, but we hadn't told her anything, and we got EVPs back there. But she immediately picked up on that there was a drowning one time, that there was another family that lived there many years before, and apparently they were hanging out on the shoreline that day, just doing what a family normally does, and apparently one of the girls went into the water and I guess slipped or something, I guess couldn't swim, and apparently she drowned. They pulled her out, and there was a lot of extreme trauma right there, and they laid her out in this one spot that she was pointing to, and that's where they tried to resuscitate this girl, and they weren't able to. That's what she was telling us. Well, that spot, we didn't tell her where we were picking up the readings, but she went exactly to that spot where we were picking up a lot of weird things going on. And she said that this is where it was taking place. And she also pointed back at his house, which was built in the early 90s, I believe, or late 80s. And she said this house hasn't always been here. She goes, there was another smaller house that was sitting right here on this property that was laid out a little differently, but that other house was torn down, and this house was put up later. And that made perfect sense because he had an experience in his bedroom one night where he just heard screaming all of a sudden right at the foot of his bed. It woke him up. and he said it was very audible, very loud screaming. He couldn't see anything, but he said it was going on right at the foot of his bed, like somebody was just very, very traumatized. And, she pointed out to his bedroom. She said, yeah, at one point there was another room here, but it was laid out differently than his bedroom was laid out because it's a totally different house. And she said that it had to do with the woman, the mother. Apparently she was just very, very traumatized over what occurred before. So, we found all that very, very interesting. And, again, we do feel the need that a lot of times bringing in a good psychic can really help with any paranormal case.
Yay. I appreciate people like you that don't dismiss people like me so we can be friends.
I think, honestly, Rita, I think it all helps with all the answers, that we're looking for, because with any really good confirmed paranormal case, the more answers you can get to telling the story, the better. Because you and me both know that history can tell a really good story about any location. Most of the time when we move into new houses and neighborhoods and different things, we assume that new house has always been there. But if you look back 100 years, you don't know what used to sit there. There might have been something totally different 100 years before.
Well, I did this one case that it was really bizarre in the general sense. Not as far as the paranormal activity, but I felt like the activity they were having was because the house was built on landfill.
Yes.
Now,
yeah.
And it was just really weird because I'm talking to the people and I'm like, okay, well, this is what I'm noticing, in your house. And I'm like, but I'm feeling like there's issues with the foundation. Like this isn't, built on solid ground. Like there's like a bunch of broke up concrete or there's issues with the soil underneath. And then they said that whole neighborhood was built on landfill. And I felt like that's what was creating the disturbances in the force.
Very, very true. Neighborhoods have also been built. Right. Neighborhoods have also been built on old cemeteries. That does happen. Especially here in Texas. When you look at a lot of the old Texas families, back in those days they used to bury their families on their land. They used to have like little cemetery plots where they would put their family. And over time that family would die out and totally disappear. And a lot of times those little plots would become overgrown, or the cemetery, the markers would crumble or disintegrate. And you wouldn't even know that plot was there. If you look at it 100 years later, 80 years later, you wouldn't know it was there. And, what's happening, I think, when they go in with these developments a lot of times, they're not looking for things like that. They're just out there to try to develop the land, put as many neighborhoods up or businesses that they can. There's always a possibility that they're going to encounter something like that.
So we have 2 minutes left. I don't mean to just kind of stop this short because it's been a great conversation.
It goes fast, doesn't it?
It goes really fast. And so your new book, Shadow of a Ghost Hunter, if somebody wants to get a copy, where's the best place for them to go to find it?
They can go to 3 places. They can go to Amazon.com and just go onto Amazon and type in under their search. They can type in Shadow of the Ghost Hunter. They'll find the book on there. They can also go to Barnes & Nobles. They can do the same thing on the Barnes & Noble website. Type in Shadow of the Ghost Hunter. They'll find it there. The book is also available on Kindle for any electronic book readers. I personally like to hold books in my hand, to read. I think that's better. But there are a lot of readers out there nowadays that like Kindle, and that's one of the reasons why I put it out there as well. So, you have a copy of the book. I'm sure you probably read it. I really poured myself into this book. I felt that there were several areas that needed to be hinged on. I put those areas into the book. A lot of people have told me that they find the book to be a really good read. Even my wife waited till the last minute. She didn't read it when I finished it. She wanted to be very critical and give me a very honest opinion of it. And she told me it was a good book. And I'm actually writing my second book. I'm not going to announce what it is, but I'm going to have a second book out later this year, which is going to be just as good as this book. So I'm really enjoying writing about the paranormal. I really do like it, Rita.
Cool. And you're fun to have on. So when the new book comes out, we'll have to, like, do a repeat performance. Woohoo!
Definitely, for sure. I look forward to that.
All right. Bye, Dan.
I'll see you later, Rita.
You too. That's Dan LaFave, his book, The Shadow of a Ghost Hunter, his webpage, graveyardshiftparanormal.com. And we'll be back with Lynn Woodland after these messages.
Just Energy Radio with your host, Dr. Rita Louise, will return right after these messages.